Oh, people of YouTube, don't you dare be sour. Clap for good mic work commentaries and feel the power.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Good Mike Work Commentaries back at you with another classic pay-per-view review. And in the spirit of Survivor Series, of course, it's the month of November, and we've got to do some Survivor Series reviews here. And this one in particular, I've been meaning to do for so long. I've been doing YouTube now for I don't know how many years, and I have not yet gotten around to doing Survivor Series 2001, a show that I attended live in Greensboro, at the Greensboro Coliseum. I was very big into going to wrestling shows around this time. I've told stories, countless stories, on my podcast and YouTube channel for years about a lot of my experiences and the shows that I've been to. And this one is one of my favorites because, damn it, I was all over this pay-per-view. I was smack dab facing the hard camera, and you can see me virtually in every shot on this pay-per-view. Here's a couple of screenshots in case you want to pull up this pay-per-view and watch it yourself after this review. If you want to find me, I'm right here. Here's a shot of me here. Here's another one. Here's another one. I'm wearing a gray sweatshirt, and as a matter of fact, I was actually wearing a Kurt Angle It's True t-shirt over top of like a gray hoodie. And here's one of me right at the beginning of the main event when Stone Cold Steve Austin is making his entrance. So if you want to check out this pay-per-view or go back and watch it, you can see me all over this thing, and it was a lot of fun. And recently, I've done reviews of shows that I attended. I just did a couple of them this past summer, King of the Ring 1999 and Unforgiven 1999, both of which took place in North Carolina, and both shows I was at. I'll throw links to those in the upper right of the screen there for those of you who have not heard those yet, and I wanted to keep that trend going and talk about another show that I attended live. And like I said, I'm going to go through some of my personal experiences of the show, my personal memories of some of the events around this time, because this was only 2 months after 9/11. We were winding down the invasion angle, which I think we can all agree as wrestling fans, whether you are old enough to remember it or not, it was a colossal disappointment. And I'll talk a little bit about what the temperature of the water was during this time and what I remember as a fan thinking of this entire invasion angle. But let's jump into this show now and start talking about it. WWE Survivor Series 2001 went down on November 18th, 2001 from the Greensboro Coliseum Complex in Greensboro, North Carolina. This is an arena that I am extremely familiar with. I have been to countless shows in this arena, just to name a few, tons and countless amounts of live events, because a lot of times I would get tickets for pay-per-views at the previous live events. They would sell them like during intermission. You can get like first crack at some of the seats, and that's how I got really good seats for some of these pay-per-views, including this one here in 2001. But I was also at Unforgiven 1998, which took place in this arena, King of the Ring 1999, which also took place in this arena. The night after, Unforgiven 1999, was the famous This Is Your Life segment on Monday Night Raw. I was in the 10th row on the floor behind the announce desk for that episode. Of course, this was the culmination of the invasion angle that kicked off shortly after WWE purchased WCW right before WrestleMania 17 in March, and around the time of King of the Ring was when they kicked off the invasion angle. Now, we'll probably discuss certain aspects of the invasion as we go through the review here, but one of the things that just blows my mind looking back, and hindsight is always 20/20, but there were so many issues with this invasion angle, and the primary one being is that it didn't feel like a real invasion angle because none of the main WCW talent was really involved here. You know, the biggest names they had was Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page, which are great names, but in terms of an invasion, when you're going up against the WWE that has The Rock and Austin and Taker and Kane and Jericho and Angle, you know, so much great talent there was no comparison at all. You couldn't bring in the Ric Flairs or the Goldbergs or the Nash, Hall, Hogan. None of those big stars, Sting is another name, came over for this because they all had those contracts that they could just sit out their contract and get paid. So had WWE waited a year, which I think they could have gotten away with doing. They should have waited a year, because think about, as soon as this invasion angle wrapped up, Ric Flair immediately hit the scene. 2 months later, the NWO was there. A few months after that, Scott Steiner was there. A year after that, Goldberg was there. So you had a lot of that talent coming in that you could have used for the invasion angle, but because it wasn't there, they had to do that alliance angle where they brought in all the ECW guys, Tommy Dreamer, Rob Van Dam, and then took all of the existing ECW talent that was currently working for WWE and add those guys to the alliance and have a couple of defections to where the entire alliance roster looked nothing like WCW. It looked mostly like WWE guys. And I'll talk about that here in the main event when you got down to your final four. In the winner-take-all match, it was 4 WWF guys in the final four of this thing that is supposed to be ECW and WCW versus WWE. And if you even notice, throughout the course of the invasion angle, they stopped really referring to them as WCW and ECW guys a lot. They still mentioned the initials and the companies and stuff, but the group became known as the Alliance instead of WCW. And the whole thing just got really stupid with a lot of unnecessary heel turns and a lot of swerves, especially the Kurt Angle thing. You know, his great feud with Austin when Austin was a heel, and then Kurt Angle winning the title, I think in his hometown at Unforgiven or whatever, right after 9/11. Great moment for him. And then he turns right around and goes heel and joins up with the Alliance. Just so many things. They were just pulling shit out of their ass, and looking back, it wasn't really that good. It was poorly written, poorly thought out, poorly planned. And had they just waited a little bit, had they exhibited a little bit of patience and tried to push this thing a few months down the line, maybe not wait a full year to kick it off, but maybe wait until the end of 2001 and then start your invasion that way. And just a couple of months after that, you can have guys like the Flairs and the Hogans and Halls and Nashes and all those guys coming in. And on WWE's side of things, you had some major injuries. You know, I've said all along, I've been saying this for years whenever I've touched on the invasion angle in this podcast before, is that one of my biggest regrets of the invasion angle is two major names were not involved. Number one, Triple H, and number two, Chris Benoit. Both of those guys were out with injuries, and I would have really been interested to see where they would have fit in with the invasion. You would think Triple H would be a WWF guy for life, but his wife purchased ECW in storyline. So you would think that Triple H would likely jump. I think Benoit might be a likely candidate to jump too, had he been around for that, because he was a WCW guy for so long. So there was a lot of things there and a lot of missing pieces on the WWF side and WCW side that really made this thing an instant failure. You know, they never even got started here. They never even got cooking. It was such a mess. I mean, it had its moments. The invasion angle did have a few moments that I really did enjoy, because I remember these times. I taped every single Monday Night Raw throughout Raw's entire, first 7 or 8 years of existence. And I remember this year primarily really being excited about the invasion angle. I had moved down to the beach right around this time. I moved in the summer of 2001 right to the beach. And I just remember staying up late right in the middle of that invasion angle in the summer, and just how many great memories I have of just living what I consider to be a pretty sweet life down there on Carolina Beach. So it was a great time for me. I really did enjoy it, but, looking back, it was so poorly done, and it was such a mess, and it was confusing, and nothing that they did here in the entire invasion angle was any good. And finally, Survivor Series is now set up to be the winner-take-all show. It's going to be WWF versus the Alliance, and in the 5-on-5 winner-take-all match that would be the main event here, whichever company lost would be out of business. So if WWE lost, Monday Night Raw the next night would be Alliance Monday Night Raw. So everything was on the line here in Greensboro. And Greensboro, when you think about it, is a really great town for this to happen. But not for WWE. Greensboro is a WCW town. Greensboro is an NWA town. So had you been able to book the invasion angle with a lot of that WCW talent, Sting, Flair, guys like that being able to be there, man, WCW might have been the baby faces in this situation. So I thought it was really interesting that Greensboro was the setting for WWE finally burying WCW once and for all. It's like WWE's just constantly trolling, the Southern wrestling fans and the NWA and WCW with this shit, putting them down in their own backyard, where many, many historic matches in the NWA and WCW have taken place right in that very city. So looking back, it was crazy, man. It was crazy. I had a great time at this show. It was so much fun. I know I was at Raw. I'll talk about it later, but I was at Raw the very next night in Charlotte as well, which was pretty memorable. But anyway, the show opens up with a European title match, champion Christian taking on Al Snow. Not much to say about this match except for Christian getting on the mic and says that it's great to be here in South Carolina. I used to love when he did that. I remember one time when they were in Albany, he goes, "It's great to be back here and he doesn't know where it is. And I think Edge whispers something in his ear and he goes, "Albany." I just loved it. So little things like that I always enjoyed about Christian. Not a very good match here. Only went a couple of minutes. He beat Al Snow with the Unprettier to retain, and the Alliance was up 1-0 right off the bat over WWF. They cut to backstage, and Austin and Deborah are arriving in the building, and they enter right into the Alliance locker room with Shane McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, Kurt Angle, and Booker T, and RVD. They're all in there, and they're all very worried that Austin is going to turn on the Alliance because there's a lot of speculation with so much being on the line that you could have some guys turning on their teams because why wouldn't they? They've done a lot of turning and a lot of swerving to get to where they are, so why would they remain so loyal to them when they weren't loyal to anyone else? And Vince McMahon was even teasing that he had an ace in the hole and that he had a trick up his sleeve, and he had somebody from the Alliance team that was going to defect later on. So that was the big tease, that somebody was going to defect, and of course the Alliance thinks it's Austin, and Austin basically just tells them all to fuck off, and they're paranoid, and, he's with them 100%. They then cut to Vince and Linda McMahon backstage. Linda is expressing some concern to Vince McMahon that somebody's going to get hurt, because you got to remember her children are involved in this, and Shane is actually in the match. He is on Team Alliance. And Vince says, you know what, when it comes to business, sometimes shit happens. They're approached by Michael Cole, and Cole asks Vince for some comments. And Vince says that he's confident that WWE will win, and that's when he teases that somebody is going to defect and rejoin the WWF in that match. They're then confronted by William Regal, who's a complete asshole, and oh my God, would this guy have something fun to do the next night on Raw. I can't believe I was in the crowd to see what he would do to Vince McMahon's ass the next night. But Regal confronts the both of them and says the Alliance will prevail. He then goes out to the ring to face Tajiri. Regal versus Tajiri is your next match here on the card. Now, Tajiri was kind of hanging around with Tori Wilson around this time, and Tori was recently manhandled by William Regal on TV, on SmackDown, that really set up this match. And Regal wound up winning with the powerbomb. He got a bloody nose due to the kicks from Tajiri in the winning effort, and it was pretty nasty to see all that blood all over his face. But after he beats Tajiri, Tori comes out to console him and to check on him, and that's when Regal grabs a hold of her and just hits a powerbomb on her, like it's no big deal at all. First he beats Tajiri with a powerbomb, and then he hits one on Tori Wilson. I had almost forgotten, well, I hadn't forgotten, but it still is kind of mind-blowing when you go back and watch some of the shows from this time period, how randomly and casually they just beat the shit out of women all the time. It was nothing. The announcers called it like it wasn't even a big deal. Like Regal powerbombed her, and JR's like, "Oh, poor Tori, got powerbombed." He wasn't even like freaking out. So it was a different time, man. Totally different time. Next matchup, IC and U.S. title unification match between Test and Edge. Now, Edge cut kind of a funny promo backstage prior to the match, referencing that him and his opponent both have unique first names, and vows that he will win. They also had Test backstage standing in front of a mirror, getting oil rubbed on him by one of the makeup artists or something, and he's approached by Stacy Keibler. They flirt a little bit, and she pats him on the ass. So they both kind of had a little backstage thing there before their match. Edge comes out to the ring, and I'd almost forgotten about how much I liked his Rob Zombie theme. Am I the only one that likes that? I always thought that theme was awesome for Edge and suited him well and fit him well, and it only lasted a couple of years, but I really liked it. Now, if I'm the wrong one here, if it was lame and everybody thought it sucked, then my apologies. I just always thought it was a pretty cool entrance theme. Now, this was a decent match. I mean, Test and Edge were both relatively new at this point. These are fellow Canadians. And I remember running into Edge and Test. It might have even been at this show, or maybe it was at a different one, Edge and Test in a Waffle House together. I could talk for days about my experiences with wrestlers in Waffle Houses. And Test, man, I always liked Test. I thought he was good for a big man. He was kind of green at first, but he kind of grew on me. I thought he had a pretty decent move set. I thought he was like just a tiny bit smaller and a tiny bit quicker Kevin Nash type of wrestler with a little bit more agility. And he put on a pretty good match with Edge. I mean, the two did what they could. Edge looked pretty strong, kicking out of the pump handle slam and a spear from Test. Edge kicks out of that as well, and in the end, Edge pins Test with a counter to like a full Nelson bomb into a roll-up and wins the U.S. title and the Intercontinental title. And they were calling it the unified title on the pay-per-view because I guess, you weren't sure which title it was going to be going forward because we hadn't gotten to the main event yet. So Edge was already U.S. champion. Now he adds the IC title to his arsenal. And that's it for Test. He's no longer a champion, but he would be back. I'll talk about him in a minute. We then cut backstage again to Stephanie and Kurt Angle. Stephanie is super stressed out. She's pacing back and forth. She's all high-strung. She's losing her mind. Kurt's trying to calm her down. And Steph, it was really funny. Steph's very worried that she's going to have to become a regular person. She's going to have to go grocery shopping by herself. She's going to have to do her laundry, her own laundry. If the Alliance loses tonight, the horror that must be for her to have to become a regular person. Great job at being a bitch. That's one awesome thing about Stephanie, especially back in those days. She didn't have to try very hard. She was very, very good and very, very natural at that character. We're then backstage with the Hardy Boyz and Lita. Lita is expressing a little bit of a concern about Matt Hardy. There have been a few issues there, and I believe this was right around the time when they were going to pull the trigger on a Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy feud. I know they broke up, but the whole entire angle and feud fell flat, and they scrapped it and wouldn't go back to that for a few more years. But I think this was all kind of during the build, and Lita is starting to get a little bit suspicious of Matt Hardy. As a matter of fact, after the Hardys and Lita talk about their matches, the Hardys have got to go out there and face the Dudleys, and Lita is in the six-pack challenge match for the women's title later. Once they all talk to each other and Matt gives Team Extreme a little bit of a pep talk and walks away with Jeff, Trish Stratus then comes out of the locker room that Matt Hardy was also in, and it gives Lita a little bit of a look, and she seems a little bit concerned, and something's up there. They show a replay of Lita getting 3D'd by the Dudleys, so damn, like I said, they're just beating the shit out of women constantly here, and now we've got the Dudley Boyz versus the Hardy Boyz tag team title unification match. Dudleys are the WCW tag team champions. Hardys are the WWF tag team champions. And this match would be contested inside of a steel cage. And this one was pretty good because these two teams have a lot of history. And I had great seats for this. I could see everything so well here. And it was a fun match. You had all sorts of stuff going on. Near the end, Stacy Keibler, who's out there, who I still maintain is the most gorgeous woman that has ever been in wrestling. And trust me, she's got some competition. I understand that. But Stacy, to me, personally is, takes the cake. But she's on the outside of the ring actually seducing Nick Patrick. He's all up in her face and he doesn't know what the hell is going on. She grabs the key from him, unlocks the cage door, gets a table from outside the ring and shoves the table in the ring. So she's able to do all this just with her sexiness, I guess. And Nick Patrick, of course, is a fucking idiot. So they get the table in there, and Matt winds up escaping the cage. And I remember sitting in my seat because you can't hear the commentary, when you're there live. And I remember when Matt jumped out, I was telling my friend, I'm like, does he want to do that? He just left Jeff Hardy in there all alone because it's not just escape the cage, it's also pinfall. Which means if he's in there by himself, it's a handicap match, and they can just beat the shit out of him and pin him. So Matt's going to have to jump back in this ring. But he doesn't. Jeff gets the upper hand, and he's got Devon. That table is still in the ring that Stacy got in there, never been used. Devon is laying on the table. Bubba is knocked out. Jeff Hardy is able to climb to the top of the cage, and all he's got to do is jump down, and the Hardys have unified these tag team titles here. But he looks down at Devon, and he can't resist, and he goes for the swanton off the top of the cage. Devon moves. Hardy explodes through a table, allowing Bubba to roll over and pin Jeff Hardy for the win and win the tag team titles. So that was just adding more fuel to the fire and more dissension in the Hardy Boyz team. And the announcers were playing it up like Jeff Hardy just couldn't resist. He couldn't resist the moment, and he put himself in front of the good of the team and all that shit. So it was a pretty good finish to that match, and it did serve a purpose going into what would be a temporary split between the Hardy Boyz. We are then joined via satellite from WWF New York by Commissioner Foley. So Commissioner Foley, who you would think would be a big part of this invasion angle, and he did play a role in it here and there, but he wasn't even in attendance for this match. And the funny thing is when you watch his interview, he was not mincing words at all. He goes, I don't know what I'm doing here. I should be there, but I love New York. It's great that I'm here and I love these fans, but why the hell am I not in Greensboro with all of you? So I don't know what the backstage story on that was. We would then cut to the stairwell where Scotty 2 Hotty is walking through, a corridor. And I mentioned Test earlier on that we had not seen the last of him. He's attacked by Test because they've got this immunity battle royal coming up, which means whoever wins this battle royal is guaranteed a job and guaranteed not to be fired for 1 year. So if you win this battle royal and your team loses in the main event, you still keep your job. So Test attacks Scotty 2 Hotty, takes his place in the battle royal, some of the names in the battle royal. And by the way, all of the competitors, most of them came out to Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, which I thought was funny. And that was one of the main songs I think they used for SummerSlam that year, right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of the invasion angle. But some of the names in this battle royal were Raven, DDP, Hurricane, Tommy Dreamer, Just Incredible, Lance Storm, the APA, Billy and Chuck, Spike Dudley, Funaki, Crash, Holly, and Albert. The final four was Billy Gunn, Test, Lance Storm, and Bradshaw. Test eliminates Bradshaw and Lance at the same time, then eliminates Billy Gunn with a big boot for the win. So we've seen that before where guys have lost a match and they've returned to win another match later. And speaking of Test, one positive thing I will say about this pay-per-view is that there's not that many deceased wrestlers on this show. Normally, when you look at a pay-per-view from this time period, there are so many ghosts. And Test was the winner of this battle royal. He, of course, is no longer with us. Crash Holly is also no longer with us, but everybody in the main event is still alive. All of the women and most everybody else on the card for this show, luckily for us, is still with us, with the exception of one or two or, maybe even three, if you really look at it here. But the next matchup was the Women's Six-Pack Challenge. Now, I had completely forgotten about the fact that they kind of abandoned the Women's Championship for a while. I think Chyna had it, and then Chyna left, and she was gone, leaving them with a bunch of women and no championship. So they did a six-pack challenge here with Trish Stratus, Lita, Jacqueline, Ivory, Mighty Molly, and Jazz. Jazz making her WWF debut for the Alliance on the night that the Alliance would die. Pretty interesting time to debut someone. She got zero reaction from the crowd. I remember being surprised to see her when she came out. I'm like, holy crap, she came out of nowhere. The match only goes 5 minutes. 6 women in this thing. They give them 5 minutes. And Trish scores what was, at the time, a major upset, pinning Ivory after a Stratusfaction and winning the women's title. Now, Trish would go on to be a magnificent female wrestler, one of the best they had up until that point. And she would really transition well. Trish was one of those models that they brought in because she was beautiful, and they were going to have her in lingerie and use her for TNA. And it turned out that once they put her in the ring, the girl could work, and she got better and better and improved and improved. She was still quite green around this time, but damn, would she get good by the time she retired. So these were the very, very early days of Trish Stratus, and even though the match I thought kind of sucked, it was still cool to see her get that moment. We are now on to the main event. This was a big one. This match went about an hour long. I mean, it took forever. They cut backstage. Vince McMahon is back there with his troops, giving him an epic pep talk. This is it. Everything is on the line tonight. Even at the beginning of the show, they opened up with a big epic "The End Is Here" video package, which was very powerful and very moving, and would be even better if they were able to pull this Alliance and Invasion angle off with some of the bigger names that were missing. I just can't imagine how great this angle could have been had you had everyone at your disposal and you could write anything for anyone. Oh my God, it could be glorious. But instead, we got what we got. The Alliance versus WWE consisted of Team Alliance, Shane McMahon, RVD, Booker T, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Kurt Angle, versus Team WWF, comprised by The Big Show, The Undertaker, Kane, Chris Jericho, and The Rock. And this was quite the group of 10 guys here. I mean, with the exception of Shane McMahon, damn, you had some talent in that ring. But look at the Alliance side. I mean, RVD had just gotten there, so he could really be considered an ECW guy. Booker T just came in from WCW, so he could be considered a WCW guy. But Austin and Angle and Shane were WWF through and through. And then on the other side, of course, everybody is WWF. Jericho had only been there for a couple of years, but he had already been far more successful in his 2 years in WWF than his couple of years in WCW. You know, Big Show was also on that team, but during the Invasion Angle, since he spent so much time in WCW, I'm surprised Big Show didn't jump ship and join the Alliance and turn back into the Giant or something. They could have used him. So the talent in this ring was off the charts. I mean, Hall of Famers out the ass in this match. But still, it didn't feel like a true Invasion Angle when so much of this talent was just WWF guys anyway. But the match was exciting. I mean, it really was. I was on the edge of my seat a little bit because even though it's kayfabe, during this time, I had a strong alliance to WWF. During the WCW and WWF war, I was firmly on the side of WWF. There was a lot of things about WCW that made me sick. I didn't like Eric Bischoff. I didn't like some of their tactics. And I didn't like a lot of things that they were doing. And I saw through it. And I thought that even though WWE, the ratings weren't reflecting that they had a better show, I felt like they did have a better show. It was better written, and the stories were better, and the characters were better, and the music was better, and the production was better. I thought everything WWE did at that time was better. And I was a little asshole back then, to be honest with you. I laugh now because I see all these insanely psychotic, batshit nuts wrestling fans at each other's throats over this AEW and NXT nonsense, and I make fun of them literally on a daily basis in my podcast for how fucking stupid they are. But really, when you look at it, I was much the same way back in these times because I was, I didn't go so far as to shit on the talent in WCW. I didn't really have a huge problem with them per se. It was more just the company. And in terms of the wrestling war, I was just firmly behind the WWE. I respected them a lot more than I did WCW during that time. So for me personally, being such a WWF guy, to be there in attendance, to witness the end of WCW, a company that used to frustrate the shit out of me, I was supposed to be there for that company finally dying, because it was quite important to me during that time in my life with the Monday Night Wars and how crazy everything got. Looking back now, it was a glorious time, and I'd, trade my middle nut to go back and do that again. But at the time, I was over WCW. And I think I was also a little bit annoyed with the angle, too. The Invasion Angle was kind of a disappointment. I just wanted to see the whole thing end. So I was happy to be able to be there. We had the Big Show getting eliminated first. Poor guy. Takes a shitload of finishers. First he gets hit with the Angle Slam, then a Booker T scissor kick, then an RVD frog splash, and then a Shane McMahon top rope elbow for the pin. So Big Show was eliminated first. Shane McMahon would get eliminated next after a tombstone from The Undertaker and then a lion salt from Chris Jericho. That was pretty cool. RVD pins Kane after a karate kick from the top rope while all of the talent is on the outside of the ring fighting. RVD is able to corner Kane in the ring, catch him with a quick kick, and get a quick pin. Kurt Angle pins The Undertaker after Stone Cold Steve Austin hits him with a stunner and then drags Kurt Angle's lifeless body on top of The Undertaker. And The Rock would then roll up Booker T to eliminate him. Jericho would eliminate Rob Van Dam with a skull-crushing finale. I'd almost forgot he was using that move for a little bit. Nailed RVD with that and got the pin on him, leaving you with the final four of Rock and Jericho on Team WWF against Austin and Angle on Team Alliance. Look at that foursome. All four of those guys are WWF guys. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. If you weren't following the storyline, you would have no idea which guy is on which team here. If you weren't watching this Invasion Angle, it just looks like four WWE guys. I wish it would have been the real WCW. I wish the Final Four could have been Austin and Rock on Team WWF against Goldberg and Sting on Team WCW or something like that. You know what I mean? But instead, we got this fucking nonsense. Austin gets busted open bad, blood all over his face. The Rock eventually locks Kurt Angle in the sharpshooter, and he taps out. So Kurt Angle taps out to the sharpshooter, and he is eliminated. Austin would then pin Chris Jericho in a really terrible-looking counter to a roll-up. Jericho goes for a roll-up on Austin, and he counters, gets the pin on Jericho, but it did not look very good. And then after Austin pins him. Chris Jericho, who had kind of just gone heel, he's coexisting with The Rock right now just for the sake of the team, but really we're smack dab in the middle of a Chris Jericho versus The Rock feud. As a matter of fact, I think Chris Jericho beat The Rock for the WCW title at some point as well, right? So they were kind of in the middle of their feud there, and Chris Jericho was about to go heel. So after he lost, he got pissed and hit The Rock with a skull-crushing finale. And kind of screwing over his team there. Undertaker even runs out there and gets in Jericho's face like, what the fuck are you doing, man? And I remember I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my God, is this how it's going to go down? I thought Jericho joined the alliance. That's what I thought from my seat. The Rock keeps fighting with Stone Cold Steve Austin and eventually has Austin pinned, but Nick Patrick comes out and pulls Earl Hebner out of the ring, preventing him from hitting the 3 count. Patrick gets taken out. Kurt Angle shows back up a little bit later and grabs the WWE title belt that Austin brought into the ring and nails Stone Cold with it. So now he's turned on the alliance. And as soon as he hits Austin with the belt, Austin walks right into a rock bottom. Rock hits it, gets the 1-2-3 for the win. Team WWF defeats the alliance with a Kurt Angle defection. So the teasing that Vince McMahon did, said he has an alliance member in his pocket, turns out to be Kurt Angle. And again, the storylines were so convoluted around this time, I was under the assumption, sitting in my seat, that Kurt Angle had gone back to being a babyface and rejoined the WWF. But that's not really what would happen, and the next night on Raw, so many things would change. But after the match, when The Rock is celebrating, you can see me all over the place clapping with my WCW television title that hangs in the background of all of my podcasts. You can see me holding that very belt in the audience there when The Rock is celebrating. Vince McMahon then appears on the stage and he takes off his coat and he throws it down and throws his hands up in the air, you know, celebrating the monumental victory and the final nail in the coffin of WCW, and that was it. And I wasn't done either, because the next night I would head over to Charlotte for Monday Night Raw, which was a huge show. And that's when a lot of crazy things went down. Paul Heyman showed up at ringside trying to keep his job with WWF, and that's when Vince McMahon fires him and brings back Jerry Lawler, who had left the company way back in February, right before all this shit started, when WWE fired Stacey Carter, and he left with her. Now that that relationship had crumbled, he's coming back, so I got to witness Lawler's return to the company in person. And in the final segment of the night, when Vince McMahon is in the ring with Kurt Angle and all that, that's when Ric Flair comes out. He shows up in the company, which you had a feeling. I remember there were rumors that day of Ric Flair being there. Because when he came out, even though it was awesome, even though it was a surprise, even though the roof blew off the Charlotte Coliseum, I kind of smelled it. You had heard that maybe he was there, and he announces to Vince that he's now half owner of WWE with him, and that got that whole angle rolling. But what was weird is that almost just overnight, with no explanation, Stone Cold Steve Austin is back to being a babyface. Remember on Raw, once I think Vince McMahon was about to present Angle with the title or something, and that's when Ric Flair came out, and then Austin hit the ring and brawls with Angle, and Flair gives Austin the title belt. So Austin went from being a heel, the leader of the alliance the night before, to a babyface again, and would go into the Vengeance pay-per-view in December as a babyface, and into 2002 as a babyface with no real true explanation as to why he's a babyface again, when he was such a cowardly chicken shit heel just 24 hours prior to this. So the whole thing was a little bit weird. You didn't know who was a heel and who was a babyface. And like I said, Kurt Angle, who I thought turned back into a babyface and joined Team WWF, is actually still going to be a heel. And this would set up the big 4-way undisputed match at Vengeance when Chris Jericho beat Austin and Rock in the same night. It would be Austin and Rock and Jericho and Angle all involved in that. And Jericho would come out with the titles in the end, which also was weird that Vince McMahon would be celebrating with Chris Jericho when Chris Jericho came so very close to royally screwing over the WWE in that Survivor Series match when he attacked The Rock after he was eliminated. So it was kind of confusing around this time, but still extremely fun. And I have so many amazing memories of this time period and going to these shows and how much fun they really were. So in all honesty, had I not been at the show, I don't know how good I really consider this pay-per-view to be. I don't really hear Survivor Series 2001 on many folks' lists of greatest Survivor Series of all time, so I don't really know where it ranks. but it's special to me, because I was there and have so many memories of it. But anyway, thanks again for taking this trip down memory lane with me. It is always fun to review past shows like this. Let me know what you thought of the show, any memories of it, and anything else you want to share about that dreaded invasion angle. Hit me with it in the comments below. Have a great rest of your night, evening, and weekend. I will talk to you guys very soon. Until next time, peace.